We're so focused on the price of our food instead of the nutritional quality
Yes.
and the long-term effect of the food. And that's somehow got to change. I don't see why people will go out and spend nearly $9 for a matcha latte and not spend the equivalent amount on a high quality protein that was farmed correctly, has all the right stuff in it.
There is a direct relationship between the toxicity in our food and then the bioavailability of nutritional elements in our food that can't be underappreciated.
This isn't a quest for billions of dollars. This is a broken system, and there's a better way to do it.
I'm really happy to be chatting today with PhD Dr. Rick Barrows, who's been at the forefront of researching innovative feeds for aquaculture that are truly scalable and not dependent on marine resources. And we're also joined today by Bill Foss, who's the co-founder of 2 by Sea. They have been really moving this industry in a impactful way to commercialize healthier, truly scalable feed. So who wants to dive in first? I have the burning question is, how did you get McFarland Springs to break out of the industry of commodity feeds? And how did you accomplish that?
We got lucky in the fact that somebody who picked up the phone had some degree of interest in what we were doing and why we were doing it. And the why we are doing all of this, why Rick was interested, well, why David McFarland was interested, and why Star Milling down in Paris, California was interested, is that they all have kind of a vested interest in maybe leaving this planet a little better than they found it. And that's the common thread that this isn't a quest for billions of dollars. This is a broken system, and there's a better way to do it. The reason we went around and ultimately requested no terrestrial animals whatsoever is that you realize the secret of agriculture is to get the price of food as low as possible. So that's your commodity pricing. That's what makes you competitive. And the person that gets the cheapest product out there wins, right? This is why McDonald's took the world over with the 99-cent hamburger. It's not good for you, but it's cheap. And you realize that all these other products that they're putting into aqua feeds, not just aqua feeds, animal feeds, these are the waste products they have no other use for that fall on the butcher room floor. And unfortunately, whether they're from cow, pig, chicken, these aren't organic grass-fed components. These are the bottom barrel treated with all kinds of steroids, drugs, bleached. I mean, it's just the stuff you wouldn't want to eat. And Rick, I think, was the first person to really discuss this topic about bioaccumulation. You are what you eat. So just because a fish eats it doesn't mean they've somehow magically purified this thing and turned it into a high quality product. It's still in there. It's just being conveyed from butcher room floor to fish to us. So I just wanted to clarify that and throw a lot of praise and credit to Star Milling in Paris, because without them we'd still be trying to. At one point we actually bought our own small mill, thinking that was our only option.
Let's just talk a little bit about protein and amino acids, because that's something that I think we should describe to the average consumer. Like, what are the elements of protein? Why is that important to the fish's diet, and how does it affect humans? And when we start looking at novel feeds, what are the factors that really need to be considered in order to have a healthy protein and amino acid profile?
What we're talking, you're kind of comparing the feed to fish meal, where it really should be diet to diet. And it's more of a philosophy. We don't have one formula at 2 by Sea because it has to be flexible as ingredients become available and unavailable. You also mentioned price. We have to tweak the formula a little bit when prices go up on one ingredient and down on another, but we've got very tight guardrails on inclusion rates. But all these diets meet or exceed all known nutrient requirements. Just by going plant-based doesn't mean that you're low on nutrients. For the last 15 years of my research with USDA ARS, Agricultural Research Service, my assignment was the development of plant-based diets for rainbow trout. So I kind of fell into this place working with McFarland Springs. And the way we did that was we picked apart fish meal. What is it contributing to the diet that these plant-based ingredients don't? So a fish meal based diet might have 12 ingredients. Plant-based diet's going to have 20 because we have to supplement with synthetic amino acids, which should be in a fish meal diet anyway. Otherwise, you're wasting protein. And you also have to supplement with the trace minerals such as selenium that you mentioned, copper, zinc, manganese. But no feed mill or researcher really depends on fish meal for those trace elements or vitamins. They come in a separate package that we add, but a plant-based diet trace mineral package is going to be different than a fish meal based trace mineral package.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. I would love to double tap on that if you could tell me a little bit more about synthetic amino acids and where some of these trace minerals would generally come from and where they're being how they're derived. And if there's any sort of parallels to other uses that the consumer would be familiar with.
Okay, I think that's three questions. The first one is amino acid supplementation. Why synthetic amino acids? And there's a couple reasons there. It's because we don't want to waste protein from an economic but also environmental standpoint. And we formulate these diets based on the ideal protein concept. That is, the amino acids in the feed should mimic the proportions of the amino acids in the fish. If you're just adding fish meal, you keep increasing the protein level until you get to your first limiting amino acid. Let's say that's lysine. And so you put enough fish meal in to meet the lysine requirement, you're feeding 20% more methionine than you need and 30% more threonine. And so what does the animal do? It takes that extra methionine and threonine and takes nitrogen off it, excretes it as ammonia, releases it into the environment, and then burns it as energy. So you've just wasted all that protein. But by dialing down the protein and supplementing with the amino acids, which are very safe, human grade, all good stuff. No, probably not human grade, but very clean. We can help the environment, but also get better growth rates.
Have you seen this trend of vegan cats? It's like on social media. It's this strangely weird, kind of cruel, hilarious thing where there's a lot of vegan people who are trying to feed their cats vegan diets, and the animals do not look like they're getting the correct amino acids and trace minerals. They look like a carnivorous animal dying slowly. So I feel like you should comment on that and comparing like a plant-based diet for carnivorous animals. And let's clarify that rainbow trout are used to eating a carnivorous diet or at least omnivore. I'd love for you just to comment on that for a second, if you can.
Sure. In fact, rainbow trout are really more insectivorous, which is a whole different thing if we want to start talking about minerals. But as far as vegan cats, we got a lot of pushback, hate mail from from animal welfare groups about turning lions into lambs by feeding plant-based diets to carnivores. But we're not changing the animal. You need to turn soybeans and barley and wheat into meat by adding the synthetic amino acids, by adding the right vitamins, by adding the right trace minerals. There's an amino acid called taurine, and I don't know if you've heard of that. It's in Red Bull and baby formula, and muscle builders eat it by the spoonful. It's a circulating amino acid, high in poultry byproduct meal, high in fish meal, not in plants. And we see we add 0.5% to trout diets, and you need higher than that for marine diets. But I think that could be, and taurine is an essential amino acid for cats. And I'll bet you that the vegan cats are having a taurine deficiency. That was a question on the master's test.
Bringing it back to the point of synthetics versus natural, if you can comment a little bit on astaxanthin and maybe also on other synthetic elements versus natural.
So I wanted to interject in there that we had a choice between synthetic astaxanthin and HP. Haematococcus pluvalis, and we went with HP instead. So whether that's considered marine or freshwater, I guess you can just call it all marine. But that's a farmed product.
Yeah, it's farmed, not marine harvested.
Yeah, and there's a tight reason for that. It's extremely healthy. We went with it because it's algae, and it's also got pigmentation to it, and it's more natural. It's more expensive, as you can imagine, than the synthetic. So I can't really say we had a great reason, because I never poked Rick at was there any value add beyond it appears natural. So also realize when you're growing something like algae, when you're farming algae, algae is not the strongest critter on the planet. So the extremes you have to go to make sure it's not invaded with something else make it a really, really tight engineering problem. And that's why the added expense is going to be there.
Rick, you're in Bozeman, and there's a lot of trout production that is not utilizing these feeds. How do you see growth rates and or responses to, let's say, inflammation or digestibility of this feed versus some either commodity feeds or fish meal?
Well, like fish meals, there's all different grades of fish meal, and poultry meals, all different grades. Some are high ash, some are low ash. But plant meals are the same. And there's two categories of plants as far as protective mechanisms to keep them from being eaten by birds and squirrels and stuff. A lot of them is chemical, such as soybeans, such as rapeseed meal. They contain anti-nutritional factors that you mentioned. In our plant-based diets, we don't put any anti-nutritional factors in there. We don't allow ingredients that have high levels. Therefore, we don't have any problem with digestion.
Like, I think this is interesting to consumers who want to minimize consumption of omega-6s, but also interesting to other farmers in making an argument that while the feed might be more expensive, growth rates or survival rates or disease resistance, increased immune function might be a beneficial long-term ROI of healthier feed. At least that's how we think about my personal health, and is in our family, is food is medicine, and eating healthy food is part of our insurance policy to getting through the cold season.
From my perspective, the way this diet read is, if anyone on this call, this meeting, goes into a grocery store to buy raw ingredients to start cooking dinner for their family, they're probably not going to go to the cat food aisle and go, I'll just add some peanut butter to that. They're gonna look at every single component and go, not healthy. And that was really the impetus on everything that went into this diet. Was it doesn't make sense financially, but if you actually saw what was going into each ingredient, it's long been said that if you take our trout feed and put a little dusting of salt on it, maybe some black pepper, it'd be a great bar snack, because it actually does taste good. One of the threads that I was chasing down back then, and I honestly don't know where it's resolved because I read contrary data, but I was aware that the American imbalance of omega-6s to 3s was so askew. Somewhere at that point, they were quoting 25-1. And depending on who you're looking at, FDA's requirement of 4-1 in US, EU's belief that it should be 2-1, 6-3s. And the fact that corn oil is such a dominant part of our American economy that it's really become part of every Twinkie, salad dressing. So you're getting just this load of omega-6. So wasn't the right financial choice, but that's why in terms of oils, we went with flax oil, because as Rick has told me so many times, fish are just like you, right? They need protein, they need carbohydrate, they need fat. And the fat they did need for energy to burn, flax was our choice just based on its low omega-6 levels. So we really believe still, and we know that we can tune the diet to increase or decrease any component that is nutritionally beneficial for humans. It's just getting people to look at it that way, the way they would buy an organic heirloom tomato, has been a problem that I'm hoping maybe you guys can help disseminate a lot better than we can. Also, sorry, one last thing. You asked about digestibility, and this is funny because Rick comes from a world of research and study, and my background is in prototyping and you release products in beta form. You just get it out the door and you let the consumer test it. So we did a lot of testing in real time on these fish, and sometimes it didn't work out. In the early days of trying just a raw soy protein, the trout just do not like it. It's just not very digestible. And as Rick pointed out, there's some anti-nutrients in soy, and it's probably the cheapest, if not one of the two cheapest proteins you can reach for between plant and animal. But it's just not, trout do not like it. We also discovered in doing these kind of real-time trials that depending on the temperature the trout are raised in, the digestibility is radically different. So between our two farms, the uptake and growth rate are very different, just based on the diet and water temperature. And then we had sunburn issues, and I think that came down to that was an inflammatory response.
Yeah, it's the lipid was bad oil.
Right.
The sunburn.
Yeah, so we really had to adjust in real time by seeing the data. So we didn't have time to speculate and test for years. We basically risked the crop just to we shot off theory without complete understanding, and fortunately it worked out for us.
Well, in the early days, a plant-based diet is going to be very light in color, and a fish meal diet is very dark in color. And that's one of the things that's inhibited adoption by the trout industry, is because the trout farmers always seen a very dark, high fish meal diet, and they don't want to pay the same thing for a low fish meal diet. So that was a problem. But what happens when you feed this light colored pellet, and David McFarland called me up, go, God, the raceway is full of poop. Well, it's because it's light colored and you can see it, and sometimes it floats, where with fish meal, it's dark and it breaks apart and you don't see it. But waste management's a major thing. And that's when we were using soybean meal. There's only soy protein concentrate anymore that uses non-GMO soy protein concentrate that has no anti-nutrients. Those stachyose, raffinose, trypsin inhibitor, glucosinolates, they've all been removed through processing.
What is the omega-3, omega-6 profile of the end product compared to a commodity grown fish? How does it compare at the end of the day?
We'd actually have to pull a test on that, but if
I've done it, I've done it, Bill, and they're using a lot of poultry oil, a lot of plant oil in commercial diets, and that's going to have high omega-6s. The flax oil is added to add short chain omega-3s. The algae oil is the long chain omega-3s, the DHA and EPA that he's talking about. One of your questions was, how does it compare to commercial, trout have always been known for high DHA and EPA levels. Well, they're not anymore because 20 years ago, they were fed 100% fish oil from the ocean, and they had DHA and EPA levels equivalent to salmon. Well, there isn't enough fish oil around to do that. So they're using very low levels of fish oil, but they still have higher levels of DPA and EPA, DHA and EPA than wild trout. If you look at a wild trout eating insects, it's not a good source of DHA. So what are we trying to compare to when we're on the farm? And Bill and Kenny have always pushed for high levels of DHA. The original sources of algal DHA had no EPA. Verimaris now, because of the challenge we pushed them into, has EPA, so we've got that EPA in there.
One nasty statistic that was out years ago, it's changed a little bit, is that the United States has the lowest per capita spending on food of any nation on the planet at 7%. Now it's grown apparently to 11% thanks to inflation, but that's only second to Canada. And I'm just reminded that we didn't invent the automobile. Henry Ford just made it cheap and one color. Was it a great car? No, but it was affordable. And I think that's a hysterical downside here, because we're so focused on the price of our food instead of the nutritional quality and the long-term effect of the food. And that's somehow got to change.
We empower somebody to make an incredible meal that they want to share, a gourmet meal. When you give somebody sushi grade, beautiful, nutrient rich seafood, they want to share it. And you don't have to do much to make a great meal when you have great ingredients. You can literally just put it on the table with olive oil, salt, and some citrus and
Yeah.
make a crudo. And you want to invite your friends because you're proud of what you did. You're all of a sudden, a chef, a badass chef. And we're bringing people together. We're creating this ritual experience where people slow down and appreciate. And if we give them real authentic stories of where this fish came from and how it was grown and why it's unique, they're going to naturally appreciate it more, slow down, and really have this connection. This is placing more value on the food we eat and on who produced it and why it was produced in this way. These things matter, and the work that you guys have been doing matters to people who care about their health. And what we're finding is that people who are reconsidering the importance of wanting to be healthy and active at 100 years old are placing more value today on their food, because there's a direct relationship between the toxicity in our food and then the bioavailability of nutritional elements in our food that can't be underappreciated.